Hello, what a great pleasure to be part of HybriCON and this wonderful initiative of Nico, Stain and team. So delighted to be here. And my topic is around maximizing your presence and your brand, particularly in a hybrid space. So before we get to the hybrid part, let's unpack for a moment what a brand is. And it's one of those things that is bandied about. What is a brand? What is a brand? Well, let me demystify it for you right now. A brand, simply put, is your reputation. It's what comes to mind when people think about you. So in the same way, when we think of a well-known brand, be it a Coca-Cola, Nike, or an Apple, a plethora of images and experiences come to mind, right? If I say Nike, whole lot of images come to mind. If I say Coca-Cola, images come to mind. If I say Apple, images come to mind. Well, in the same way that images come to mind with a company or a product, images come to mind when people think about you. So it's your reputation. It's the impression you make. It's when you aren't in the room, what people say about you. And that's what a brand is. So I'm going to ask you to think about what words and images would you like to have to come to mind when people think about you. And when I speak about in a hybrid world, it's both when I think about you in person, but also when I think about you virtually. So take a moment. And the first exercise is to think about what are the first 5 adjectives or experiences or images that you would like to have to come to mind. So I know some of the ones you're thinking about right now is I want to be seen as a subject matter expert. I want to be seen as a collaborator. I want to be seen as compassionate. I very seldom have people in my workshops or keynotes who say, I want to be seen as difficult. I want to be seen as a conflict producer. No, most of the time we just want to be seen as someone positive, someone who is a team player, someone who has powerful leadership presence. But it all begins with first deciding how you want to show up. The next part of the experience is saying, what actual experiences am I providing to be seen in that way? So if I want to be seen as having initiative, I'm going to ask you then, what experiences, what concrete experiences or examples can you give me where you have reinforced that strength or capability? So in my years as a producer at CNN, one of the things I'd like to be seen as is having initiative. Now, I can't walk around with a t-shirt that says, hello, I'm Nadia, I've got initiative. It doesn't work like that. The way I have to be perceived as having initiative is to demonstrate the initiative, right? So a good example that I give is when Muhammad Ali died, I knew on the Wednesday or Thursday that he was ill before he died, and I contacted boxing aficionados and civil rights activists. So when he did die overnight on a Friday, early morning on Saturday on CNN, we had a whole plethora of remarkable guests, including Evander Holyfield and Manu Pacquiao and Don King live on air. So that's a good example of demonstrating how I want to be seen. So while we talk about the hybrid world, doing it in person and virtually, the foundation is to understand that the brand is how you show up in the minds of the people you impact. So part of that, of the way you show up, is what I call your physical presence, your physical brand. So how do you show up in meetings? How do you show up on your virtual platforms? And there's a verbal and a non-verbal aspect to this. There's what you say, and there's also how you say it. So going back, it all starts with how you want to be perceived, and then what experiences are you providing to be seen in that way. And it all starts with being mindful and conscious of both what you say, but equally important is, you got it, how you say it. So let's take me being on a virtual platform right now. Some of the things that I'm doing verbally is I am trying to be very succinct and I'm trying to give you ideas and words that you'll remember. That's the first thing. But non-verbally, what I'm doing is I'm looking into my camera lens, and I ask you to think about the middle of your eyes parallel into your camera. That's if you're on a virtual platform. If you're in person, you want to make eye contact with the people around you. And if you're doing it in a hybrid scenario, as I've so often had to do recently, is I talk to my in-person audience. So let's say I was doing that right now. There's my in-person audience, but then I'm also connecting with my virtual audience by remembering that they can see me through the camera. I also recommend that if you're doing virtual presentations or meetings, that you have someone monitor the chat, because it's very difficult if you're the presenter to both monitor the chat, connect with your in-person audience, and connect with your virtual audience. So how do you show up physically? Everything from the way you dress to body language. And when I do presentation skills coaching, I focus on the two aspects. I focus on the what and the how, both what you say and how you say it. Now, there are many other aspects to your overall presence, your brand, how you show up in the minds of the people you impact. There's your physical. When I talk about your virtual, I mean how you email and how you text, because you can come across very well in person. But if you're writing abrupt, aggressive texts or emails, that can undermine the overall way you want to be perceived. Other aspects of overall branding are how do you relate to others and your relationships and your network. And while it's much more organic in person, having to do it virtually requires you being mindful and intentional. So the reality is COVID changed our lives in that so much of our interaction took place virtually. Now we're doing both virtual and in person in what we're calling the hybrid workplace. And I'm recommending to all my clients across industries, whether they be SCORE in reinsurance or Home Depot or Coca-Cola or Porsche, or as we say in America, Porsche, is that everybody become very mindful, whether you're in person or virtual. And the first step is to take yourself off autopilot so that you can really think about how you want to show up, and then ask yourself, am I providing the experiences to show up in the way that I would like, both in terms of my physical presence, my virtual, interpersonal, and social. So I have lots of information on my website, which is nadiaspeaks.com, but also on my big smart app, there's a page to my online programs. So I hope that's given you some idea. And if you can just think about how you want to show up, that's a very good start. I'm Nadia Bilchik. My 10 minutes is up. So I'm now delighted to do an interview and get to know you all so much better.
You're watching HybriCON. I'm Ursula Buerta, and I have the honor of interviewing Nadia Bilchik after her stunning keynote that she just gave us about how to brand your presence in this hybrid world. Hi, Nadia. Thank you for your talk.
Oh, that was such a pleasure. I always tell people it's much harder to do a short talk than a long one because you have to really decide what's important.
Absolutely, but you gave so many golden nuggets, and I want to ask you, you've rebranded yourself when you were living in South Africa, you moved to the US, you went to CNN, and then now if we think COVID happened, And we've all had to rebrand ourselves and re-navigate ourselves. And I'd love to know where you're at right now. How have you had to rebrand and restructure since COVID?
And you said it so well. So at the beginning of COVID, I actually was in a state of shock because I had gone from only delivering presentations in person. And although I was very familiar with the television camera, I had to get very quickly familiar with the webcam. And there's some similarities and some differences, because think about a television camera, it's almost just you to an audience, but you don't get feedback. When you are presenting on a virtual platform, you need to engage your audience. It's so important. If we're doing Zoom or WebEx or Teams, it's not just about me speaking. It's about me observing what's going on with my audience. And that's why I really prefer it if people are on camera, if at all possible, because I can see their facial expression. But you have to be so much more intentional and mindful, because in person, it's so much easier to read your audience than it is in a virtual space. So I've been training and coaching both speakers and physicians and team leaders and anybody who is having to meet virtually on how to hyper-focus so that you really make the most of the virtual space.
I love that, Nadia. And do you have any tips for how to build that more credible, trustworthy connections over camera, over these virtual platforms?
So one of the things that people don't do is they don't see the beginning of a meeting as prime real estate. So for example, Nico, I may have got on a few minutes before this call, and one tends to go, let's wait till everybody gets there. And what I tell my clients is use that moment to say, hello, what city are you in? What's the weather like? Or even what's one fun thing you did over the weekend? But I use that moment while people are coming into the meeting to chat.
I love that.
It might even be if I'm doing a presentation skills training or personal branding training, I might say, what are your goals for the session? But I make sure that every single moment of that virtual interaction is utilized. There's no let's wait for everyone to get here.
I love that, because it's really about mastering the pre-meeting. And in the olden days, we used to go in before the time, chit-chat. So you're really saying hone in on that chit-chat in the space while you wait. Now,
and it's not...
Yes?
And I was going to say, it's not organic. Think about it. It's not a very natural thing to do, is it? It's much easier to wait, and then you wait for people to unmute, and it's a much more fabricated, artificial environment than if you and I, even now, we're chatting in a boardroom or face-to-face.
Absolutely. So there is more intentionality. And I know you speak a lot about intentionality and being deliberate in your presence and how you show up. And I wanted to ask you, what do you see is the biggest need among your clients, speakers, or who you're working with? What is the biggest need that they're struggling with in this hybrid world?
So it's so interesting, because it doesn't matter if I'm working with high-end luxury cars or reinsurance companies or beverage companies or real estate companies. People have a need to connect. There's a wonderful book by Patrick Lencioni, and he writes about the 5 dysfunctions of a team. And the first dysfunction of a team is lack of trust. And we can't build trust until we have connection. So I work a lot with people on understanding, how do we get to a point of connection and trust? How do we build that, whether in presentations or as part of our brand or in networking? And I would say that the need to do that in a world that we call VUCA, we call this world volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. So people's sense of trust has already been eroded by a pandemic, by an uncertain world climate, by wars in Ukraine. All of these things undermine our sense of trust. So it's never been more important than it is now to really build connectivity, to build trust, to get people to collaborate in order to be productive.
Absolutely. I think that's so valuable. Amy Cuddy did a study, and where they said on first encounters, we assess people on trust. It's so important and so valuable. Nadia, is there any projects that you're currently working on that's exciting you and thrilling you?
Well, I have absolutely loved talking to large organizations about the going back to work or working in a flexible or hybrid space. So one of my clients came to me and said, look, it's a global trend. People are having to go back to work at least 50% of the time. And that means go back into an office. And I don't know about you, but I loved working in my jacket with my shorts and my sneakers or my flip-flops, right?
Yes.
So there's a lot of resistance to going back to work. So what I've been talking to people about is, I'm not saying it's absolute or this is forever, but right now, if you do have to go back into an office 50% of the time, here are strategies for you to make the most of that in-person time, because there is no substitute for it.
Absolutely not. I totally agree with you, Nadia. Thank you. You've got so many golden nuggets. It's such a privilege for me to be speaking to you. And you, isn't
it wonderful that you can be in Johannesburg and I can be in Atlanta and we can be communicating across continents?
We're connecting, and I've been such a fan of yours. I love your work. So this is, for me, a little dream come true. I love this. It's amazing.
Well, and another thing is, how do we take this virtual connection and next time I'm in South Africa, meet in person? So how do we go from virtual to in person? And then how do we go from in person to virtual?
It sounds like you wrote a book on networking. After the break, we're going to get into this type of connection. Thank you, Nadia. We're quickly going to a break and then we'll get into more with Nadia Bilchik. You're watching HybriCON. I'm Ursula Botha, and I am so honored to be interviewing Nadia Bilchik. Nadia, you have written books, you've done online courses. Can we start with the books? What have you written? Please share with us the knowledge that you share.
Well, the first book I actually wrote about networking, and it's Own Your Network, and it's Mastering Your Networking in Person and Online. And Ursula, I wrote that after coming from South Africa to America and having to build an entire new network. And some of us, because we live in the place that we were born or went to university, have organic networks. When I moved countries and continents and size of the road, didn't have an organic network, so I had to build one. And really, I just write about strategies to build mutually beneficial relationships. And the biggest nugget, and something I learned over the years, is the importance of being a go-giver as much as a go-getter. You know, we think of networking as, what do I need from that person? And it's to go in with the mindset of, what can we do for each other? And Nico Steyn, Ursula, who is the mastermind behind all of this, is such a great example for me of a networking story, because we first met at MNet when I was presenting and he was a producer, director. And fast forward 20 years, we reconnect virtually during COVID, and now we're collaborating. So I've learned that networking or building long-term meaningful relationships is first about the connection, but it's the ability to turn that connection into a real conversation where there's a sense that we are there for each other, and then to collaborate. So if we can do that more than we are right now, think about if you could nurture your existing network and build new connections, the value of that is just incalculable, right? And that's what I wrote about in the networking book. And then I partnered with Kat Cole on a book called Small Changes, Big Impact, which is around maximizing your presence and leveraging the power of your personal brand, which is another big topic, the concept of what is a brand and how do I constantly and consistently project the best version of myself. And then I was very lucky to partner with the South African Laurie Milner, and we wrote about Own Your Space, which is specifically for women, women around believing in yourself and owning your headspace and owning your physical space and owning your virtual space. So that was that book. And I was also special editor on a book called Life After College, which is, all the things you wish you knew during university days. So I've also recently partnered with someone here, and we've been writing about rapid transformation in a volatile world and just how important it is to be agile and to constantly reinvent yourself. Ursula, like you've had to do, and I've had to do, and Nico has had to do, and companies around the world have had to do.
Absolutely. Nadia, I'm just in awe of you. Already you are extremely inspiring, but you're so passionate.
As are you.
Thank you. They say if you see it in somebody else, you've also got it. So I definitely see it in you. But how do you do it? How do you write all these books and go for it? Is it small, consistent acts?
Yes, because Ursula, it's so interesting. The amount of people who say, oh, I really want to write something, but don't. So it's about doing it. And there's such a gap between wanting and doing. And I always say for those of us in the world of professional development, our goal is to help people go from what they know they should do to doing it. But I have also been very lucky. I have a dear aunt and friend who is a fantastic writer. So we've collaborated on my writing projects, and that's helped enormously. It really has, because we've got to a point that we're so much in sync that I can literally dictate a whole lot of ideas to her, or I can take a seminar like I did with Own Your Network. I took my networking seminar, I transcribed it, and then she wrote it. And I know that Nico Stain, by the way, also helps people write their stories. In fact, he's got a program about writing your story in 7 days. Yes. But it's just the discipline to do it and make it happen. And there's another thing. This is so interesting for anyone who's watching this, including you, Ursula, going, maybe that book's been written, or maybe that subject's already been covered. And I think part of us is to go, it doesn't matter. There's lots of networking books, but I don't know a lot of networking books about people who went from being an MNet presenter in Johannesburg to moving to the United States and going to CNN and starting again. So it's how do you tell your own story and see the value in that?
So there is, every voice counts. It doesn't matter if that topic has been covered, your version and your lens.
Yes, it's your spin on it. There's nobody who's gone your exact path or had your exact journey. And I think part of owning your space and part of deep confidence is to remember that each one of us has this none of us had the same parents or the same upbringing or the same obstacles. And one thing is for sure, it doesn't matter where you are in the world or what your career is, everybody has had obstacles to overcome. So the unique challenges that we face, I think, is what makes our stories so interesting.
This is Inspiration Station. So you have 3 courses. Oh,
that's good. Inspiration Station. I like that.
You have 3 courses that you shot here in Nico's studio.
Yes, I'm so excited. More? So Nico and I partnered on a program on personal branding, and he's done such a brilliant job of making it visually interesting and accessible, easy. What is a brand? Then we did one just on presentation skills, presentation power. How do you present so that you're engaging and compelling? And there's some simple things that we break down that you can do to make meetings and presentations so much more engaging, and then networking and building relationships. And there's such an important thing in that program, which is what stops us doing it. Why don't we reach out? So online courses, there's a page I have on my big smart app, and really it's what we call asynchronous learning, meaning you do it at your own pace and on your own, and just bridge that gap between, yes, we all know what we should do, but do we do it?
And it's also because it sometimes pushes us out of our comfort zone, because I do know you give some instructions, like go follow up with that person, go reach out. And then
it's very practical.
Oh, but it's scary.
All of the programs, whether it's the presentation skills or the network and the branding, it's just concrete exercises, simple things, which is interesting because the second book was Small Changes, Big Impact. And sometimes it's just small things that you can do that make the biggest difference.
Absolutely. So Nadia, so those are the 3 courses people can get of yours. They can also, there's so many books of yours. I'm going to start reading. I've done your courses. Your books are next. And where can people get hold of you? How can they connect with you?
I have very easy website. So Nadia Speaks, because Bilchik is a mouthful. So nadiaspeaks.com. But I know there's info on My Big Smart Up as well. And it's so easy. You Google me, the website comes up. Lots of contact information there. LinkedIn is also great. And I just look forward to hearing questions, feedback, because my goal really, Ursula, is I think there's some simple things we can all do, both personally and professionally, that make such a difference in the impact we have.
Absolutely. And what's just so lovely is you walk your talk, you've been there, you've had to reinvent yourself, and that is so inspiring for somebody like me
Many
or
times, right?
anyone.
It's interesting because, we all, I think mindset and resilience and accepting that the world changes at a rapid rate and we can't hold on to anything. That's the certainty, right? Yeah. You've certainly heard that before. I love, Peter Dirk Ace always said, adapt or die.
He did. Love Peter Dirk Ace. Nadia, this has been such a privilege. Thank you for your time. And we've come to an end.
Ursula.
Thank you. So we've come to an end. Thank you, everybody. Please connect with Nadia. Go look at her courses. They are extremely inspiring. And it's just going to give you that push and a reframe as we reinvent ourselves in this new hybrid world.
Excellent. And I love what you said. Be